to cloud. Bad boys, what you on the mirror. All right, we're back. It's so funny when I have the Google Doc open. I don't know if people have like privacy settings or if they're using like incognito mode, but anyone who's looking at it, it gets an anonymous like avatar, and it will. So like right now I'm looking at it, and it's like there is an anonymous camel looking at your Google Doc today. It has like a little camel picture. It's kind of cute.
I wonder if people pick it or if it's default. Like, it's just assigned your camel.
Yeah, I have no idea, but it's kind of funny.
Folks, welcome to RP Plus on YouTube and RP Plus itself, RP Plus webinar. This will be the second recording that goes to YouTube. The first one is getting posted. Well, when you guys see this, it'll have been posted already, obviously, but should be getting posted as of this recording. And I just talked to our Scott, the video guy, Scott, the sound guy, and he's asking me what to put like in the links and stuff like that for this other one. So it should get posted. And then these will be posted every week. So the first two will get posted kind of like a couple of days of each other, and then once a week. We're going to take RP questions first, RP Plus first. If you like having your questions answered for sure, you should link in the description. Join RP Plus, $10 a month. But if you want to get your question possibly answered from YouTube, then we're going to take questions from the YouTube comments every now and again. Because we haven't made it official post on YouTube, I'll be scrolling through my Instagram. I always have a couple questions looming. So we'll do that. Yeah. I know. James, just you wait. Your YouTube questions might arguably be worse than Instagram questions.
No, that's true. We might not even get YouTube questions. So I didn't realize they had posted some of the older RP Plus videos to YouTube, and Mel started reading off some of the comments on one of the ones I was in, and they were so bad.
Incel stuff?
Yes. And I was just like, keep that away from me. I don't want to know. I don't even want to know. I don't want to.
Like guys who no one talks to. That just share opinions no one cares about. They'll be like, Dr. James sounds a little bit like Dr. Mike, but more like a pirate. It's like, do you have no friends to tell that to?
Somebody said, I don't know if they were joking or not, but somebody literally was like, they're basically the same person. They even look alike. I was like, we don't look anything alike.
No, he said
wow.
All of James' hair, they're the same person.
I don't know if you heard what Mel said, but
I did. That's wrong.
Yeah, totally wrong. Right? Whatever.
Incels. We love you as much as your step parents did.
Keep it away from me. I didn't even because people were messaging me like, "Oh, I saw your YouTube video." I'm like, I haven't posted a YouTube video in
what?
Forever. All right.
All right. Let's get to it.
Yeah, let's do it.
Okay. Starting with Basim Imadi, who I now follow on Instagram. I look through all of his many zero posts. Basim, how about this? Post a picture of your goddamn self at the very least on Instagram. Post some training videos. Post some kind of cereal that you like. You're a human being. A love of fucking God, I assume. Or you're a hypertrophy machine. Basim says, hey, gentle docs.
So like gentlemen, but gentle doctors?
Yeah, I guess. Thanks for answering my questions 2 weeks ago. Hope your days have been going great. James, I feel the conflict of two James Hoffmans existing in the same timeline can only be resolved in one specific way. How, one might ask? Well, of course, you two simply have rock, paper, scissors way to winning. Whoever loses gets to do keto, along with a daily 20-rep squat program and a 60% calorie deficit and 3 hours of sleep until you simply die. Sounds fair to me. Man, that's a rough way to go. Holy shit.
Just for losing rock, paper, scissors? Come on. Oh, man.
My week's questions are as follows. Number one, nutrition question regarding ancillary protein from carbs when massing. Swear to God that Mike has mentioned this a long time ago, but I, for the love of God, cannot find where it was. So I apologize for being that asshat that makes you answer something you've already said a million times. Since I'm massing, I have to eat proteins, portions of carbs that even the cleanest carb sources I can find, cream of wheat, rice, etc., has about 7 grams of protein per 100 grams dry weight. My memory serves me right, only about a quarter to a half of gluten protein is actually digested. Not to mention these sources, PBCAAs. So if, say, my protein portion of rice is 100 grams, my meal's protein's 30 grams, do I do pretty much 27-ish grams of protein from my main protein source while only counting 3 grams of protein from my rice? How does this work with carb sources that are more heavily protein heavy, such as pasta, which usually has around 13 to 14 grams per 100 grams of carbs, as I'm eating like 15 grams of protein per meal? So here, let me address a couple issues. if you look at the research on protein needs, not for athletes, but for regular people for sure, only a relatively small quantity of protein needs to be, put it a better way, not all of your protein needs to be complete sources for it to maximize everything you need for protein. So the worst case scenario is if you were to count grain proteins exactly like you counted your regular proteins, unless you're eating a fuck zillion amount of grains, and you just got all of your protein from ancillaries, it probably wouldn't be a concern if you met your daily protein needs. But you can do better than that. Slightly better than that, I think probably the best way is to count them for roughly half of what they are. That's what I usually do. So if something has 10 grams of shitty protein in it, like a wheat bagel, it's fortified, it's 10 grams of wheat protein, I count it as 5 grams of protein. I think that's a real good approach. I think it's fine. And just don't overthink it and count it half. Yes, there will be a calorie and macro misalignment. If that kind of thing bothers you, you need therapy. So just count your macros, count half the protein. Don't worry about the calories that up to, because macros yield calories anyway. Lastly, what you can do is just not count ancillary proteins at all. That's totally possible. And for example, in many of the ways that we derive calculations in the RP Diet app, we don't count ancillary proteins because it really doesn't fucking matter if you get too much protein. Because if you're eating enough protein anyway from lean meats, you're checking all the boxes, getting a little bit extra or quite a bit extra from grains is no problem. And if you say, but Dr. Mike, that means I won't be losing weight. Well, guess what? Just lower your calories, motherfucker. And how do you do that? Usually you lower fats, you lower carbs. As soon as you lower carbs, your ancillary proteins go down too. It's a self-solving problem, right? If you want everything to magically align and everything to make perfect sense, you got to do a whole lot of calculation, exact PDCAs, exact ratios. Nobody's ever going to do that. It's fucking insane, right? So that's the gist of it. And he goes on to say, my main issue is that I have 30 grams or less protein per meal. I feel very uncomfortable getting less than 20 grams from high PDCA foods, using chicken, for example. I'm afraid that muscle protein synthesis, muscle metabolism won't be stimulated to the same extent from half pasta and half chicken protein as it would from just chicken. Totally, yeah, it would be a little bit of a downside because the fact that you usually need 20 plus grams of protein from a good source to get enough leucine, et cetera. What's your thoughts? Now you know my thoughts, James.
Yeah, I agree with you completely. I think it's one of those things in the short term, it's easy to to get caught in the details and get in the math. But the thing is, as Mike already said, in the long term, it really doesn't matter. It's a wash because if your body weight is not going up on mass, what do? You add calories anyway, right? And do you need to be like really pumping the protein at that point? Probably not. You're going to be adding carbs and fats. You're going to get more indirect protein anyway. Same thing on cut. Like if you're not losing weight, cut some of your carbs, some of your fats. It solves itself. So I would say like you'd have to be doing something really shitty, like unfathomably shitty, if you were doing a mass phase and you were gaining weight and not gaining like a good decent proportion of muscle because of the dietary choices that you're making. You would really have to be fucking it up pretty bad at that point. So I don't think it's worth sweating too much.
Yeah. And also, by the way, if you really feel inclined to make your calories and proteins match, what you can do is, like, let's say pasta has 10 grams of protein. Count 5 towards protein, count 5 towards carbs. Because the way that low quality proteins get treated in many ways resembles carbs, and they actually bump carbs out. They spare carbs to some extent because they're digested relatively readily. So if you're really, really crazy on the calories, just count half the proteins as carbs, half the proteins as fats, or sorry, half the proteins as carbs, half as proteins themselves. But I would not, that's not a rabbit hole that's worth going down.
And frankly,
it's not worth going down for you.
If you eat relatively the same foods for the most part, like on a weekly basis, you generally eat the same foods and you just do it, you measure it the same way over time, it's all a wash. It's all a wash.
Even if it's not the same foods, if you eat a variety of different kinds of grains, it all washes out. Where do we run into issues? If you eat only shrimp and fruit, and then you switch to tons of pasta and chicken, like there could be some problems. But then again, if you do that every other week anyway, like the fluctuations over 2 weeks mute themselves, and you don't make dietary adjustments. You know, you make maybe once a week dietary adjustments, and then the other week sort of doesn't make sense, and you make them another week later. Over the course of weeks and weeks, all that shit just completely washes away.
Totally.
Number 2, training questions regarding pumps. Sometimes when I train, I feel I start getting a pump after a few sets, but as I do more, my muscle kind of goes numb. Well, numbness is best explained by the lack of feeling the muscles whenever I flex it. I'm most concerned with my chest. I have a very hard time feeling my chest when I flex it after doing about 7 sets of chest in one session, despite having had a deep pump where I felt really well for some sets before. Does this mean I'm doing too many sets? It might. I can't tell if the pump disappears or not, as the whole muscle kind of doesn't flex as hard as it can, and it feels like I don't have much feeling in it left. Well, you should be able to visually perceive a pump. And you should be able to feel how tight your skin is. So I'll give that some thought. I have to note that my soreness is stronger and lasts a little longer after the days I train in the way that makes my muscle numb than if I train only to the point of getting a pump and feeling the muscle really well. Yeah, that almost certainly tells me you're causing too much damage. I've done that before, and it does not result in much muscle growth. That's probably over the U-shaped curve of MAV. It feels somewhat unintuitive to train past pumps. No shit, it should. Is my hypothesis here correct that if X sets gives you mild soreness and Y sets gives you moderate soreness, Y is more stimulating and disruptive despite X giving my chest a better mind-muscle connection and pump? No, I'm sorry, your hypothesis is probably backwards. Whatever gives you the best pump, best mind-muscle connection, and gets you a little bit sore is probably best. And if you going, I would say this actually, I proclaim the following. Until other research proves me wrong, anytime you get a pump and go beyond the pump to get less of a pump by doing more work, I will stake a claim that you're probably doing more harm than good. James?
Yeah, so I kind of feel like it's hard to put a solid yes or no on this one. It's one of those things where you're probably, if we were to guesstimate, like Mike already said, you might be going a little too much. Like you might be beyond the point of where you need to go. You also might be in that sweet spot where you're closer to your MAV and you cut it off right at the point of where you get that numb feeling, like you had good pump, and then all of a sudden you got nothing going on. That might be a good spot. It's probably maybe just a little too aggressive, I would guesstimate. But again, it's hard to say. We don't really know. So I would say maybe back off one set from wherever you notice that you got that numbness, see where you end up on that, and see if you're still making progress week to week. And if you are, then you know, okay, maybe that my MAV is maybe closer to 6 sets, not 7 sets, something like that.
Yep. And then he says, that's all, folks. Thanks for your subsequent answers. Also, one last question, if you guys feel like it. How would you recommend people here to ask questions? I feel like I'm doing a disservice whenever I ask super short questions without context, but I also feel like I'm wasting everyone's time by providing unnecessary information. I'd really like some feedback. Well, actually, you just gave yourself great feedback. Provide all the information that is necessary for context. Any less, we can't answer your question. Any more, and you're just flailing about. To provide a little more, you know what I'm saying? We're buddies. I don't give a fuck. We'll read it. But if you're like, if an entire swaths of your paragraph have dick to do with the question, you can spare everyone. But if your question is not comprehensible until and unless you include some background, then you need more.
Yeah, I think the trouble we run into is when somebody's like, I've been doing this. What do you think I should do next? And then we're like, well, we have no fucking clue, right? Like who you are, what you're doing. So like training related questions, like some kind of training age, something relating to your goals, something relating to maybe where your body comp is at. Those are things that are all really useful. But like what kind of food your mom makes you on Thursdays, I don't give a shit, bro. You can leave that out, you know, that like that kind of stuff. So just like Mike said, just enough to get the context of the question. Because if you ask a super vague question and we don't have any understanding of what you're doing, it's very hard to answer.
Yeah.
But that was great.
Yeah, it was really good. Yeah. And then he says, P.S. Mike, you pronounced my name correctly in the first try, but then you messed it up again. Ha ha ha. Say bass in the same way you say brass, and then short M like brim. Bassam. 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 I don't know. That sounds Americanized, man. It sounds westernized.
I know, right? Brass and Jim.
Yeah, in Russian, your name would be Basim. Like that would be Basim. So I would call you that. But Bassam sounds interesting.
Hey man, you seen Bassam?
Hey man, Bassam. So basically, hillbillies pronounce your name completely correctly, as it's probably Arabic origin. Get the fuck out of here, man. You're fucking with us. I know you're fucking with us.
How could it not be Basim? That's what I would have thought too.
Ridiculous. Bassam. Bassam. No, it's not Basim. I say ba. I didn't know Arabic had the ba sound. Basim.
Yeah, that's crazy.
I hope you're Arabic. Sorry for assuming.
He's fucking with us.
Fuck you, Basim.
He's just trying to get us to do this pronunciation game. He's laughing at us right now.
Let us know if we're fucking it up still. All right. Magnus, a man with two exactly equivalent names, says, hey, Mike and James, for best long-term muscle growth, I'm 19, have been training for about 2 to 3 years, if that's important.
See, that is helpful. That's what we're talking about.
There you go. Would it be better to do alternating specialization cycles or just train everything with reasonable high volume, not going above either muscular, systemic, MRV? And if one did a specialization cycle, 3 months, focusing on shoulders and arms, then did a specialization cycle focusing on chest and back after that, would it then be necessary to have a maintenance phase between the two Yes, for systemic fatigue.
Mhm.
That's an easy answer. I would think it is, but I would like to hear your opinion. So that was an easy question. So actually there's an actual correct answer of whether or not to do specialization cycles. And here it is. You have to, of all the muscles you're interested in training, you have to find their individual MRVs, and then you have to add them up all together in a program and see if individual MRVs exceed systemic MRV. It's not that hard to do. You just start training your muscles at MEV and just keep ramping up sets on all of them and see if you pay systemically or locally. And for some muscles, you might pay locally first, and then the system might pay. But maybe you can, if you systemically never overreach and you locally overreach with all muscles, then by definition, you can train to maximize gains in all of your muscles locally. You probably don't need a specialization cycle. You can still benefit from one because of the systemic easing, but you clearly just don't need much of it. On the other hand, this happens with most people. If your systemic MRV is reached before all local muscle MRVs are reached individually, then you definitely need a specialization cycle of some kind at some point to hit some muscles all the way to the MRV, and some muscles kept at maintenance volume at MEV. So give that a shot. I'll give you an example of the kind of person whose systemic MRV is essentially out of reach. Well-trained former endurance athletes, like they can locally get to MRVs, but systemically they don't have an MRV that's relevant because they're just gods of the fucking endurance and made them recover so goddamn fast. Hilariously, a lot of times, and their legs also have no MRV that's anywhere in sight, but they'll hit the legs local MRV with weight training way before they hit systemic MRV. And for upper body, it's for sure the case. Like endurance athlete trying to train biceps, I mean, after 20 sets of biceps a week or 30 or 40, they'll be smashed and biceps don't work. But systemically, they're like as golden as they ever been because it's nothing to them. They've been handling systemic loads that are crazy. People coming from elite CrossFit a lot of times for systemic MRV is amazing. But people who are relatively untrained, people that are larger, stronger, which is why specialization phases are better for advanced athletes, they start to have a systemic MRV that's way lower than the sum of all local MRVs. And then that's relevant to try to split up the body.
Yeah, that was really good. Mine's going to be kind of a summary of what Mike said. So kind of the idea being you can always do a specialization phase. It's always like not a terrible idea. The thing with the kind of the full body is you probably want to do that as much as you can until you literally can't anymore. And Mike already explained what that means. So one kind of good way of thinking about it is do the full body mass phases until you start to notice that you're really not making like tangible gains anymore. When you start to see like you're not hitting PRs across the board, like maybe you hit PR on one exercise, but not like the dozens of other ones you were doing. You don't see really big spectacular changes occurring anymore, at least not like a tangible change. And even if you're doing like a body composition assessment, you can use that too, though. Just be kind of wary of some of those things. And what you'll find is that after several years of doing full body mass routines, you'll start to notice like a plateauing effect where you're like, yeah, I got a little bit better, but I'm not seeing those gains anymore. And that's when you'll start to know like, okay, specialization has actually become more necessary rather than an option.
And another like sort of getaway of estimating this is when you get up to your systemic MRV, you'll notice a systemic effect, a systemic fatigue, which feels different. So for example, you're about to go train biceps. Is your worry that you won't be able to match your reps from last week because your biceps feel just fried and fucked up? Or is your worry that you don't even want to train biceps because you don't want to train, because you don't want to do anything, because you just want to sleep and just go and die somewhere?
Yes.
If it's the latter, you're probably hitting systemic MRV. Your biceps, like I've actually had sessions before, I wouldn't say it's painful to admit, but it's the real deal, where I look at how many sets I should be doing for biceps, and I don't do as many. I do half as many because I'm so systemically fucked up. I'm just not going to be doing 6 sets of curls. I'm just going to do 3. I'm going to sort of try.
You just look at the log and you're like, nah.
Fuck that.
That's
right?
not
It's not like that has nothing to do with your bicep MRV. Like biceps don't influence your brain somehow. Like you hit your bicep MRV when you're motivated, psyched, pumped. You hit a set of curls and you just shit the bed. Like you just underperform. You're like, I feel great, but my biceps don't goddamn fucking work. That's local MRV. Right? Systemic MRV is you just don't want to live anymore. If you're getting into that situation before you get to the local muscle MRVs and you know you're leaving reps in the tank and even just not wanting to train, even though you're quad, it's like, hey, is your quad sore? Nope. You can go train? Yeah. Do you want to train quads? Nope. Okay. Systemic MRV.
It's like the, the Farnsworth meme where it's like, I don't want to live on this planet anymore. It's like, I don't want to lift on this planet.
Exactly. I'd like a lift on the moon or something where it's lighter.
Mm-hmm.
All right, from the galaxies. Ooh, actually, I have another one. From the empty, dark husks of former galaxies ripped apart and destroyed
Oh my.
comes Anshuman Radhakrishnan. Says, hey docs, hope you're both doing well. My question is about the utility of using the raw stimulus magnitude index. This motherfucker got the inside scoop. It seems to me that any trainee that is always going to be limited by one of two variables, time or fatigue, maybe motivation as well, but I just count that under fatigue. Because of that, doesn't measuring just the stimulus of any exercise or prioritizing exercises based on the stimulus magnitude without considering fatigue or time not really offer you anything? I got an answer to this, but let's see where it goes with this. Where I'm coming from is that you're always constrained by some or multiple factors, so it doesn't really benefit you outside of perhaps intellectual masturbation, which is very pleasing. To even think about which exercises have greatest raw stimulus. I just think that dropping that index altogether leaves explanatory power of the SFR, STR, and SFTR intact. That is the stimulus to fatigue ratio, stimulus to time ratio, like how much stimulus can you impose in how little time, and SFTR is how much stimulus can you impose in the smallest amount of fatigue and time cost. Right? Whereas there's some scenario where you'd actually be interested in ranking exercises based purely on raw stimulus. Even for a trainee with a large amount of time and a high MRV, they're still limited by either time or fatigue, even though they might have more room to cram worse SFR, SFTR ratio exercises in their training, because additional sets of high SFR, SFTR exercises would actually be lower cumulative SFR, SFTR than just switching to slightly worse on average exercises and getting some fresh sets in. I still wouldn't throw out all SFR, SFTR in favor of raw stimulus. Maybe I'm arguing against non-existent version of your views, but I guess I just wanted to clarify for myself that raw stimulus magnitude, while definitely useful theoretical concept, is limited practical applicability. So your last sentence actually nails it. It does have limited practical applicability, but limited does not mean non-existent. It had to be derived theoretically, because otherwise the other indices just make no goddamn sense, because you have to understand what raw stimulus magnitude is before you can put it in the numerator and put fatigue in the denominator. I will say, and James, shit test my logic here if you can. My candidate that I was thinking of for raw stimulus magnitude is college student with shitload of free time and dorm food that says, I can't gain any back size. And you're like, you will deadlift until you fucking bleed. And motherfucker, you got the time. You weigh 130 pounds. You're no worried about no fatigue. You just got to pick, and they're only just concerned with how much damage can you fucking do to them and how much raw stimulus can you throughput. If you look at stimulus to fatigue ratios, and here's really where the problem comes in. If you look at stimulus to fatigue ratios, what you end up having is, let's say you populate a list of stimulus to fatigue ratio and stimulus to time ratio. If you look at stimulus to fatigue ratio and you say, I'm just going to have them do the best exercises from here, that's biased by the lower fatiguing exercises. So something like barbell bent rows with an underhand grip could be really high on that list for that person, but it's just, he'd have to be in the gym like forever for it to, to make any goddamn sense, because the raw stimulus is also not, it's great that it's not costing a lot of fatigue, but it's kind of like, who gives a shit about the fatigue, right? So deadlift might be really low on that list, but since he doesn't care about fatigue much, they need to be higher, right? On the other hand, let's say, okay, well, stimulus to time ratio, what about that? Well, for that, some of the exercises on stimulus to time ratio are going to be exercises just very economical to do. Like, they can be done in a fast time. Deadlifts, again, suck. Because like deadlifts take a long time to warm up, a long time to set up. Like hand cleans or something like that, like mid-thigh pulls with lighter weights can have actually a really good stimulus to time ratio. You don't get in incredible shape with them because, they don't have a huge stimulus, but if you're rushed for time, they're really great to squeeze in a bunch of stimulus in a short time.
Or like lunges.
Yeah, something like that. Yeah, for sure. So basically, we have the raw stimulus magnitude index, mostly theoretical purposes, but also for that individual that is very, very open time-wise, very open fatigue-wise, and you just want the best powered moves, because for all intents and purposes, he's never going to run into time constraints, and he's never going to run into fatigue constraints. So instead of looking through the SFR lists and the STR lists and thinking, okay, but what I'm really looking for is the highest raw stimulus, just make a list of raw stimulus magnitude, and then you'll have it, good to go. Which is why, like, when people write into bodybuilders and say, hey, my back doesn't grow, bodybuilders almost say, like, look, here's the deal. Just barbell bent rows, fucking heavy deadlifts, weighted pull-ups, shut the fuck up. Do as many of those as you can. If you never get sore, you never feel like you're getting hurt, Like, if you never feel like you're getting disrupted, you do a bunch of those, and if you don't grow, it's because you're not recovering enough. It's not because you're training hard enough. So that's where the raw stimulus magnitude, I think, comes in, because it doesn't, it's not needlessly muddled by the irrelevant fatigue scale and the irrelevant efficiency scale, which is to say time economical exercises, of which something like the deadlift is neither, but is the best bang for, if you want to bang to build your back, if you can afford it, so to speak.
Yeah, and so Ansuman, I think this is a really excellent question, by the way. So kudos. So I agree with Mike. I think the main point is not using that index by itself. It does have limited practical application as a standalone item, but it's used to derive the SFR and the STR, and that's where it's most useful, right? So if you're looking at SFR and you're looking at the raw stimulus index within that, right, you might see that that actually biases more towards low fatiguing type exercises. So those that provide a decent raw stimulus, but generally are very low fatiguing, right? That's a good bang for your buck. So you're going to see those being favored by SFR. Whereas if you're looking at the STR, like the more of the efficiency index, you're going to see those are going to be more favored by high raw stimulus exercises. So if you don't have a lot of time, you don't have a lot of effort to be fussing around, you're going to pick those big, high raw stimulus ones just because it's going to give you a lot of bang for the amount of effort that you put in. So I do agree. I do think that the practical application of that by itself is limited.
Because who doesn't have fucking fatigue and time constraints? It's not that many people.
And that's the point he was making in his question, which is a very good point. So at that point, what the utility is so that you can generate the SFRs and STRs, and that's probably the most appropriate way to use that index.
Yeah. Ansh, basically, like when a bro at the gym, I forget where you go to school, Yale or some shit like that. When a bro at the gym asks you, like, dude, I need a fucking, how do I build my back? Like, I don't know if you're going to be, he's there anyway a bunch. I don't know if he can, he spends a lot of time talking to his friends between sets anyway. So clearly his time efficiency is just not his concern. And, he like, fatigue's just not his concern because he sleeps 12 hours a day, smokes weed the rest of the day. Sometimes he goes to class and eats a bunch of dorm food. He barely trains anything else. So, what are you going to say, man? You're like, well, technically speaking, fucking barbell bent rows off a deficit or the pause. Like, nah, you're going to be like deadlift, rows, pull-ups, get the fuck out of my face. Yeah. And then you're going to hit him like only Anshuman Radhakrishnan has. I mean, he hit him in the sense that you hit him so hard that the time-space continuum collapses around him and restarts the universe.
Yeah. Or like, legs is a good example because it's like, okay, this guy trains his legs once per week, maybe, right?
Yeah.
Like reluctantly. So what are you going to have him do? You're going to say like, okay, I'm going to have you do, 4 sets of 15 lunges on each leg. Then I'm going to have you do 6 sets of 10 of the knee extension. And then we're going to do some like hamstring. No, just pick one. This is the only time he's going to train legs this week. He's probably going to do a half-assed job anyway because he doesn't give a shit. That's like a good example of that, right? Whereas if you have somebody who's like most of the listeners on this program, people are going to be a little bit more mindful because they're training for something and they have very specific and clear training goals in mind. And then they're going to be a little bit more conscious of the SFRs of the exercise they choose because they have constraints. Whereas if you have somebody who doesn't have a lot of constraints, you use the raw stimulus magnitude or the STR as a proxy for that. And that's probably good enough.
Yeah. Another interesting thing is a potential use of it is people who are very, very hard gainers in a specific body part. At some point, if you've tried a lot of stuff, you may realize that even just by increasing volume and high SFR exercises, there's just a certain amount of disruption that's not happening. Like there's a certain number of cable flies that just won't grow your chest after a while. So there might be a situation where someone is a really hard gainer, but they've avoided the compound heavy basics, which is another way to say the biggest raw stimulus exercises. At some point, you just got to get them out and be like, okay, like it's like a grenade launcher. The grenades are super expensive, so it's not cheap. It's super fucking inaccurate, so there goes that. That's like the SFR and STR.
Collateral damage is massive.
That's it, totally. But when you need to blow shit up now and nothing's worked, like there's this gorilla mutant thing coming at you, fuck accuracy, you know what I'm saying? Fuck cost. We need to survive. Shoot
that guy needs to die.
100%. All right.
That's a silly example.
Yeah, there you go. Jeff Heen. Hi, docs. I'm currently watching Dr. Mike's video, Advanced Hypertrophy Concepts and Tools, Lecture 2. Again, they're getting out fast. And it got me thinking about my current training setup. I'm a classic physique competitor. I don't even know what the fuck Lecture 2 is about. You have to remind me.
Some of these are old, right? It's like, years ago.
Yeah, for sure. This one's brand new, thank God. But that doesn't mean anything because I already forgot what it was about. Actually, I can look up real quick. Hypertrophy concepts and tools is in my folder. Lecture 2 is on training modality compatibility. Easy. Okay. This is a James Hoffman question, basically. I'm a classic physique competitor currently in my off season. I play hockey once a week. It's
nice.
roller hockey, and we play naked. I'm just kidding, I didn't say that part. Ooh. It's don't have any rug burn. It's roller hockey, and the games are about 50 minutes long, 5-0. And I'm pretty gassed afterwards, though. And I currently train 6 times per week in this current massing down cycle, high volume, high frequency. I've been wondering, how much do you think hockey affects my hypertrophy program? I go back and forth on if I want to continue playing, but I always find myself going back since I enjoy it. I tell myself it's good for cardio health aspects. And there has to be some benefits of moving different directions like that, right? Thank you, guys. James, hit it.
So it's definitely impacting your hypertrophy training. Let's not just glaze over and say, yeah, it's probably fine. So the immediate answer is yes, and it's obvious, right? Because you're doing something else that's not hypertrophy training, right? Then we can look into like the hockey activity itself. So I think it's pretty fair to say that like if you are trying to really grow your hips and legs as a very specific focal point, yes, that will be more impactful than other things. The thing that I'm actually more curious, and if it doesn't look like you're on, but maybe next time you can clarify, is how much contact do you guys play in your roller hockey league? Because if it's like normal level hockey contact, you bet your ass that's going to be impeding your ability to do hypertrophy training.
Especially injury risk.
Yeah, if it's more like recreational and you maybe just get a little shoulder bumps, but you're not really checking each other really hard, or there's no boards that you're checking up against a lot or stuff like that, it's that component's probably not really huge. And then it would mostly just be like how much legs and systemic, because of the cardio, the intermittent cardio stuff, how much your legs take a hit and how much the systemic takes a hit from the intermittent exercise. In the grand scheme of things, I think if it's rec league roller hockey, I don't think you're missing out on much. I think if you are doing like a specialization leg phase, then you would have kind of a conflict of interest. But for the most part, I don't really think it's a big deal. If there is a lot of contact, you might consider pushing your mass phases back a little bit to when you're not doing as much hockey stuff. But I know you're just doing it for health and for recreation, so I don't think it's a big deal.
Yeah, great insight. I watch a lot of gay porn, and recreational roller hockey has 18 editions. 18 volumes of videos.
When you started the question, as soon as you said naked roller hockey, that was the only thing I was imagining from that point. I was trying to like get my mind off of naked hockey. I was like, oh God,
it's no competition. It's really a cooperative sport.
Yeah. We did, there was a rugby event in Illinois called Horfest. And it's where people would you just go and sign up as individuals, and they just put a hodgepodge of people together to make teams, and then you'd play with like other random people. And one of the things they did was naked rugby. Right? Yeah, rugby.
Oh my God, dude.
And I thought it was going to be like kind of kinky and sexy, like, ooh, this is cool, right? It was awful. It was fucking terrible. It was like the worst. Like they would do it at night, and they would get all the cars and turn their headlights on the field so it would be lit. And it was all fun and games until we got to the line out, which is the out of bounds thing where they pick each other up, and there would be just like a dick and nuts like in your face. It was.
You did it.
I did not personally do it because it was too gross, but I was watching it thinking like, thank God I didn't do this, because this was.
Is it fun and kinky, or is it competitive? Like, do the guys, are they trying to win?
Yeah, and it's co-ed. So like you think it's going to be fun and kinky, and then you realize like the type of people who play rugby
naked voluntarily.
Yeah, and like it's hard not to be competitive because it's a contact sport. Like you can't just like bump somebody,
totally.
You know what I mean, and be like, oh
yeah, like I don't give a shit that you're naked. I'm trying to win, God damn it.
And it's just like a disaster. It's a fucking disaster of a thing because like it's like, and it's like when you're playing co-ed stuff. And it's contact, like there's always that's a hard line to cross, because like the women generally will feel free to hit the men as hard as they want to. And then the men are always reserved because they're like, I don't know if I should be hitting this person as hard as I should be hitting other, it's just like an awkward thing. Not to say that there's a right or wrong answer there, but it's just a weird disaster thing. But anyways, naked rugby, terrible, awful. Don't do it.
I have a really great libertarian thought on contact sports. Sign that waiver. Sign that fucking waiver.
Yeah, that's true.
You can get a shot at the champ. You feel me?
Yeah, I don't know. Let's.
But on a serious note, there's no.
Let's not even go there. Yeah.
All right.
Gonna get in trouble.
Fabian Distler, this is a almost certainly German name, says, Tiago, feel free to split these up for multiple Q&As. Hope it's okay. I just dump all of them here. Thanks, man. You're doing a great job. Don't tell Tiago he's doing a great job.
Yeah, I would have edited that out.
To leave RP, so we tell him he does a bad job.
I thought it was nice that he gave Tiago a shout out, so I left it in there.
Nice. Tiago's great. But he's Portuguese, which means he's could be better.
Meh. Ho hum.
He says, so Fabian says, hey, Docs, I'm back for more big. Thanks as always. I suppose there should have been a question there.
Back for more. Big thanks as always.
Oh, I'm back. I am back for more. Jesus, I'm making fun of Fabian while I can't read.
No, it was written like kind of strangely. Maybe it was a copy paste thing.
Yeah. No worries. I'm back for more big.
I'm back for
Thanks
more
as
big.
always. What an idiot. Oh my God. I'm just going to retire.
Oh, I was thinking the same thing. Like, that can't be right. Wait a minute.
I'll try it again. Ready? Hey, Docs, I'm back for more. I'm back for more big thanks as always.
Yeah, 2 words.
That's like the Sean Connery on SNL, the rapist for 500. He's like, therapist. He's like, that's what I said. The rapist. He's like,
penis mightier.
Yeah, that's right. Number 1, regarding the rating system in the male physique templates, I have trouble with rating of 0. Sure, if I am not sore, it's a 1 or 2. If sore, -1, -2. But how to measure exertion? Shall I just check the reps from last week? Still go in line with the prescribed RIR of this week? Let's say I just did 10, 9, 8 with 50 kilograms last week, 2 RIR. If this week I am not sore and I do 10, 9, 8 with 50 kilogram or more and it falls into the week's range RIR, can I rate it as easy? What are the scenarios for a 0 rating? Well, there's unfortunately a limitation of the MPT, which doesn't have the performance ratings gauged exactly with the soreness rating, so it's really 1 rating. But what we really like to do is, as far as performance is concerned, if you meet your target reps at the RIR you think you should have had, then you rate it a 0. Okay, if you meet your target reps at an RIR that's a little higher, which means like you're supposed to do 1 RIR, but really you met all your reps at 2, or you got higher reps at 1 RIR, then you rate it as a +1, right? And if you just blew the shit out of the water, it was a fucking joke, you rate it as a +2. Right. On the other hand, what do you rate as a -1 is, you know, if you hit all your reps, but it was tough, and you're like, ooh, I'd be lying if I said it was the same RIR, then you for sure rate it as a -1. And -2 should also come with some soreness stuff, but -2 is when you feel like, whoa, like -2 goes a little bit beyond what the numbers are themselves. It goes into how did the whole session make me feel? Because remember, it's all the whole session. Is if the session was like, oh my God, I barely walked out of here. There's no way I'm matching my performance next week. It's just way too much work. That's a 2. That significantly reduces your volume for next week.
Yeah. And that's a big limitation of the system that's on there. And that's when having a coach or just doing it yourself can be handy. But the way I kind of think of it is very similar to Mike, whereas like 0 is like, oh, that was a good workout. That was like what I expected. Nothing seemed off, but I was huffing. I'm a little messed up, but I'm going to bounce back. +1 is where you're like, dude, that was nothing. I could have done that twice over, right? +1 that. -1 is when you're like, man, that fucked me up. I'm going to need a little while to shrug this off. That's really what it boils down to. And you can think about it more deeply, but at the same time, it is kind of like a +1, 0 system. You don't really have to think about it much more than that.
Yeah. Just one easy trick for you, since you're an advanced user, just think of how many sets you want to do next week and think if it's going to be enough to stimulate adaptations optimally, or if you could do more, if you could benefit from less, and then rate accordingly. 0 does not increase or decrease your sets. So if you want a little bit more volume, rate it a +1. You want a little bit less, -1, so on and so forth.
Yeah, you're probably going to know where you're supposed to end up, unless it's your first time running through the template. So, you could also check your ego or check your lack of desire as well, where you say like, maybe I'll just rate it a 0. And you're like, well, I actually have to get like 5 more sets in over the course of the next several weeks. I should probably.
Yeah. And that's a perfect example, actually. So like, let's say you have 2 more weeks left of training and your workout just like beat you up pretty bad. Do you want to increase now and shit the bed a week early? Maybe not. Let's just keep it, have another really good workout, and then in the last week, we're going to have another volume addition. Versus if you have 2 weeks left, And this current workout was like pretty doable. And you know that even if you add 2 sets or 4 sets, you're going to be able to do it just fine in the next 2 weeks. It's definitely time for an addition.
Yeah, totally.
Number 2, let's talk exercise selection for quads.
No
I am a 1 meter 92 centimeters, and I tried to become a decent squatter for 3 years now. I don't want to get too deep into this, but Fabian, we just want to be as real as fuck with you. I'm not trying to pick on you. All you can do is do your best and get better. There's no such thing as a decent squatter. I don't even know what that means. You're just trying to get better. Just say you're trying to get better. Oh, God. Sorry. I don't mean to be rude. You know what I mean, James?
No, but your point is very valid because it's like, are you trying to get more jacked or are you trying to be a strong squatter? You know what I mean? It's like those
There's
two
overlap.
they overlap for a while, but then they also diverge at some point.
Yeah. Best I ever got was about 1.1 times body weight as my 5RM and just below parallel high bar squat. After cleaning up my form and increasing ROM to almost ask to grasp with Coach Jared Feather,
nice.
My 10RM is now about 50 kilograms of 80 kilograms body weight, LOL. I started out of squats are for me since they are my weakest compound. Yes, weaker than my upper body lifts. By the way, how weak something is for you has no relation to how much it makes you hypertrophy. People with really good deadlift leverages get very little out of the deadlift because it's almost no range of motion for them. So just remember that. Progress after the first Meso MPT week 4 was plus 5 kilograms in 2 reps, so decent, I guess. Jesus Christ, that's fucking awesome.
Yeah, what's wrong with you? That's great.
Leg press 10RM is at least body weight.
It depends on the
Let's talk about exercise selection. So the question there is no question.
I think the question, if you didn't list
should I keep doing squats? Yes.
Yeah.
Yes. This is great progress, dude. I don't get progress like that anymore. 5 kilos and 2 reps total on a mesocycle is amazing.
Yeah. No, you could make a case. Yeah, your progress is great. It might not be the strongest lift for you, but it still might be a really good SFR exercise for you. So that's really the kind of the root of the question is squatting a strong SFR exercise for me? Well, the absolute, you could look at raw stimulus magnitude and you'd say like, well, the raw stimulus isn't that great comparatively to some of the other things that I'm doing.
But the range of motion might be so big that the raw stimulus is actually massive even with a small external loading.
And like you don't have all the external loading, so the fatigue is a little bit lower. Right. And you're making progress on your performance. So that's actually a huge win. It might not feel like it because it's not your strong lift, but it still might be a good SFR exercise. Now, that being said, you also might find that maybe doing the leg press or something else is even better. Who knows? That it is a little bit of trial and error, but for the time being, don't give up on squats. It seems to be working.
The better question is, do you feel it in your quads? Are they limiting factor in your squat? Yeah. If the answer is yes, then fucking keep doing it. All right, 3, not sure if I read that on the forums. Shall one increase/decrease calories to maintenance during deload week, no matter if cutting or massing? Yes, but that usually happens automatically because you just adjust your calories to your work level. And if you are cutting, for example, your work rate reduces, but you want to adjust to maintenance. So you would increase the calories, but because your work level has reduced, you decrease. So the net result is you basically just keep your calories the same.
Yep.
Number 4, currently reading the recovery book. Great job. I love it. I got a question regarding actual fatigue and perceived fatigue, as there seems to be a difference between them, e.g. some interventions. Like heat therapy may decrease DOMS and perceived fatigue, but not actual fatigue. How can these two types of fatigue differ and why, James?
Yeah, it's a really simple answer, and it's a good question. It's because it's the perception of fatigue and the perception of soreness and readiness, right? And unfortunately, our mind often plays tricks on us all the time. I can't tell you how many times my mind's played tricks on me, like, hey, you should go sleep with that person. It seemed like a good idea. It turned out to be a terrible idea. Stuff like that, right? But yeah, so the issue is that some things can make you feel better. Some things have analgesic effects. Some things have like just general psychological recovery effects, like social support and being with your friends and even compassionate touch to some extent. The problem is that they often don't actually affect the tissues that are fatigued, right? Whether it's connective tissues or muscles and stuff like that. So you can do something like get a massage is a great example where you might have trained really, really hard and you're like, man, I feel fucked up. I want to go get this massage. The massage will make you feel better. And if you were to take like a Likert survey, like, do you feel fatigued anymore? Right? You would probably answer, I feel less fatigued than when I started, right? The problem is that all the training has not healed. All the damage that you've done is still there. You just don't feel like it's there. So it's what we call.
So it's not there. Yay. I should train hard again.
Right. So just keep in mind, like perception is always flawed. That's just an inherent like human intrinsic quality, right? The way that you view the world is often riddled with errors, and the same thing goes for yourself. You can rank how you feel incorrectly, or you can be getting a wrong reading about how you feel. So just keep in mind, a lot of the times, you can do performance testing and try this out for yourself. You might feel like you're ready to go, and then you try to unrack the bar and you get squished down, you get crushed, you get pinned. It happens. It happens to Mike and I every now and again, where we think we know this shit inside and out, and you go to the gym and you're like, wow, I was way underprepared today. I had no idea this was going to go so badly. It happens. So perceived fatigue is just how you feel about it. Real fatigue is the actual performance decrements that you're experiencing from the training.
Wonderful. Oops, I didn't finish this question. I'm asking, since during the first 2 weeks of my hypertrophy mesos, 4-time MPT, I feel super trashed and mega sore. Then I can then increase sets up to 8 and feel more fatigued, but it just not feel so bad anymore. I hope that description makes sense. Well, soreness is perception of soreness is only part of the fatigue equation, and you can get the repeated bout effect of soreness can actually ameliorate, but your cumulative fatigue still continues to escalate. So there is a difference between cumulative fatigue and acute fatigue. So definitely a big difference.
And also in like the soreness example, you also get adapted to the stimulus that you're presenting, right? So like you do squats for the first time in week 1, it's like, fuck, that made me feel super awful. But by weeks 2 and 3, you're like, it doesn't really make me feel that bad anymore.
Yeah. Number 5, another one regarding fatigue. In your writings, fatigue is most often looked at in the realms of training, performance, and recovery. I wonder if you also have some good metrics on how to consider training induced fatigue in other areas of life. For example, in week 4 plus of the meso, performance is still golden, sets, reps, weight can go up, but at work and during social activities, I feel super wrecked and tired. Who gives a shit? Fuck work, fuck social activities. If your sets and reps and weight are going up, you're the fucking man.
Yeah.
I find this gets overlooked. Oh, sorry, James.
No, let's keep it going.
I find this often gets overlooked when talking about fatigue management. If fatigue shows itself at a work/social event before manifesting in training, how do we deal with that? I mean, the obvious options are to either accept that one is not a professional athlete, does not have to take the burden, or just to grind through it for 2 or 3 weeks every meso. Any other solutions?
So I can see why you think that it's overlooked, but that is actually something that is included even in the recovery book and in some of the assessments that we make. Is there are perceptive measures, there are psychological variables that we can look at, like mood disturbances, sleep disturbances, anxiety, just even like mood and affect, stuff like that. That is part of the equation. And if you are training very hard, training up to your systemic MRV, you will absolutely be feeling it in all walks of life, not just in the gym. You're going to be feeling it at work, in your social engagements, everything. So on the one hand, if you have lofty goals that are very important to your life in terms of diet and training stuff, that is kind of a necessary evil, a consequence that you will accept as part of your life at some times throughout the year, right? You just say like, I'm training really hard. I have lofty body comp goals, or I want to be really fucking strong or really good at sport. There's going to be times when I'm fucked up and it's going to make me less social, less fun to be around, all those things. Mm-hmm. If the social part of your life is equally as important or maybe even more important than your fitness goals, that is not something that is necessary. You can train well below that systemic MRV point and have very, very little disruption into your work and social life. And I think that's a completely reasonable trade-off. Mike and I usually come at the perspective of people who are trying to achieve their physical best performance in whatever it is that they're doing. That's kind of the assumption that we generally make, but that's not most people. Most people are kind of somewhere down on the spectrum where they have other goals, they have jobs, families. Yeah, a spectrum of lifestyle and fitness related goals, right? And there's no right or wrong answer. It's totally up to you. So it is part of it. It is something that we can assess, and only you can decide what is like an appropriate level disruption for those things.
Brilliant. The TLDR, James's view is shut up and train, brother.
I mean, that is our view more often than not, I would say, like in a more eloquent way. But it doesn't have to be, right? If you're like, I'd rather go out and hang out with my friends, like that's fine. Do it. Who cares?
For sure. Number 6, let's say one trains with a 4-day upper lower split in weeks with high energy levels and more time. Or we'll train up to 5 or even 6 times by adding just another day of the 4-day split. Think A, B, C, D, A. Week after that, B, C, D, A, B, etc. Obviously, this will lead to fluctuations of volume across weeks. I always wondered how much weekly volume fluctuations would hurt progressive overload principle. I think it would. Think of 1 week, 12 sets, next week, 16 to 18, next week, 12, etc. Providing progressions with reps, RAR load increase. Hope that makes sense. would one be better off hypertrophy just to stick to 4x a week split and go for the bonus days in the good weeks? Yeah, I think there's potentially two answers. What I'm going to do is I'm going to try to steel man the variation. And James, if I can ask you to steel man the consistency one, I think we'll both get away with a pretty good perspective. So the benefit of variation is that sometimes you can't train that hard during the week, but you do what you can. Maybe you'll train 3 days, and then another time your week frees up. The boss is yelling at you anymore. You got lots of food in your fridge and lots of time to sleep, and you fucking hit it super hard. As long as per session your volumes are incrementally going up slowly, and as long as you understand that there's variation, so you're not super quick to decide, oh, I hit my MRV, or oh, I'm underperforming, or oh, I've got increased weight. You understand that there's going to be fluctuations. I think within a certain boundary, it's totally okay to do more when you can and less when you can. But on the other hand, I think there are some unique benefits to consistency and structure. James?
Yeah, and just to real quick, a lot of people adopt like DUP or auto-regulated styles of training, which is very similar to what you're describing. Even Kyle Pierce's weightlifting program was very similar to what you just described. On the other hand, I think there is a good case for consistency, and the reasons are generally pretty obvious, right? The first and most obvious one is just tracking. Like if you do the same thing in the same conditions all the time, it's very clear when the numbers are changing if something is going well or if something is unchanging or if it's going poorly, right? And you can adjust things accordingly. One of the other maybe less talked about reasons for doing things consistently, aside from tracking, is actually just maintaining the same circadian rhythms throughout the day so that your performances, your sleep, your recovery are all very consistent. Because this is a problem we had when I was coaching rugby at ETSU. Sometimes we would have to have practice from like 8 to 10 at night. And then the times that we were allowed to go to the gym would be like 6 to 7 in the morning. And then other times throughout the week, it was not like that. And they would be wearing it so fucking hard on those occasions because most of the time they didn't have to do that. But when they had to practice and or train at unusual times, their performance would be all over the place because they'd be training under different fatigue conditions, maybe different sleep conditions, maybe different, all of those things. So aside from the actual just consistency and tracking perspective, which is a big benefit, you're also maintaining the same conditions of sleep, performance, and circadian rhythm, which I think is probably just as important.
Yeah, good call, James. I think that fundamentally what I do is if someone's advanced, knows their body really well, and I know they're making a full-hearted effort, but they just have a really variable schedule, I have no problem with them doing the variable split where sometimes they train harder, sometimes easier. But if someone's prone to fuckery and prone to laziness and prone to just disappearing, I'm like, look, you gotta do this 4 times a week, you're not going to do it at all. Variability is something you earn, so to speak.
That's exactly what I was going to say. I think you stick to a rigid program until the person proves that they can handle otherwise.
Yeah. All right. So, James, I would like to tell you quickly about a very advanced scientific experiment they did once.
Oh, really?
They took a particle accelerator, except in it they put a Japanese man, like with the fucking samurai sword and all. Oh, no. And then they had a neighboring particle accelerator, which is like a door right next to it to open it up. And they put a Jewish man in there. And he was like, I don't know why am I here? And they accelerated them to like 0.99 times the speed of light. And they smashed the two of them together. And out of that experiment emerged super villain Sean Morikawa Rubin.
That sounds like they achieved Japanese fusion.
That was fucking good, man. That's what they called him for the 3 femtoseconds that they were still alive, because he immediately incinerated the entire galaxy.
Oh, and humanity ended. Fools.
Sean says, fools. Fools is such a sweet supervillain thing to say.
I know. It feels so good.
Another one is human fools. Like, it's so small. I just want to say that for real once in my life.
It catches people off guard, too, when you say it. Like, when you call someone, they're like, what? You just like Skeletor me? What the fuck?
Sweet. I always think of my default character for that as Perfect Sal.
Oh, yeah.
Like
definitely.
His voice. Human fool.
Fools.
Number one, not sure if this is an area you guys may be familiar or not, but just thought, see if you have any thoughts. A lot of commonly prescribed medications like antidepressants, anti-anxiety medications, etc., often have one listed side effect as weight gain. Do you think this is simply due to subconscious changes in things like need or appetite, or are there actual mechanistic ways in which these medications cause weight gain? I can almost certainly tell you that outside of really, really severe antipsychotics, most of those drugs affect need and appetite. And there's no mechanistic stuff. But I don't know much more than that, James.
That's my understanding as well. Is that it can definitely influence like your hunger levels and your physical activity levels, and that's mainly what it comes down to.
Some of these drugs, they have no idea what this. It's really trippy, like a drug approval process. I'm not saying this is a bad thing. This is great. They're using them and they're effective. But like, if you read up on some of the ways that drugs work, like some drugs can effectively suppress symptoms of schizophrenia, which is really incredible because it makes schizophrenics like functional individuals in modern society. But they're like, this drug works by making this protein, and then you have absolutely no idea how it works beyond that. And some of the like side effects are like unbelievable, like a reduction in work capacity by like half. Like,
yeah.
What? Like it like how? And it's like, we don't know, but it sure as hell keeps you not schizophrenic while you take it. I'm like, damn, I guess it's worth a trade-off. You know? Like,
some of them have gnarly trade-offs. I remember in high school we had a teacher in our business class, and he had I don't want to get this wrong, but I think it was like a rare form of cancer at the time. He got a terminal diagnosis. They're like, homie, you're gonna die. And they were like, there's this weird experimental treatment that has a very low success rate, but we can give it a go. We're not really sure. He got the experimental treatment. It worked. He lived, but it gave him elephantitis. So he was this big, I mean, the guy was
the fuck out of here.
He was a huge swollen mess. I mean, he looked like a just savagely obese person. And the reality was that he had a medical condition, right? But you could tell people looked down on him like, you fat fuck, right?
Wow.
But it was like that or die. You know what I mean? Like a weird trade-off.
I just rewatched the movie Predators, plural, for the 20th time.
That's the one with Lawrence Fishburne, right?
Yes, it is. And Adrian Brody. And they asked him, like, he's like, are you a good person? He's like, I'm alive. And it's just like, hey, you're fat. Like, I'm alive. Fuck you.
Yeah, exactly.
I'm still here. And Lawrence Fishburne has so many great lines in that movie. They're like, what's your name? He's like, I'm the one that got away. I don't fuck with. And I'm like, oh my God, favorite character.
He was like explicitly like cameoed into that movie. Like there was that character was not in the movie at all. And then they're like, oh, Lawrence Fishburne. Okay, we got something.
He showed up on set halfway through, and they're like, get in here, buddy.
Yeah, exactly.
Again, one of my favorite scenes ever is when Adrian Brody comes back to save what's her name, and the psycho killer guy is like in psycho killer mode, and he's got like the blade of poison, and he's standing behind Adrian Brody, and he's like, well, turns out you're a really good guy. And as he turns around super quick and stabs himself with his own needle or whatever, like his own blade,
right,
and like into the bottom of his jaw, he goes, I'm not a good guy, but I'm fast. Amazing.
Oh man. Did you see John Wick 3?
Yes.
Lawrence Fishburne's character was game over. I was just like, why are you in this movie?
I can't wait for John Wick 4 when him and John Wick and the other guy like fight against the organized crime cartel.
Oh yeah, that's gonna be sweet. I thought Lawrence Fishburne was dead for sure in that movie.
I thought for sure dead.
I was like, he got ninja, he's done. And he comes back like, I'm back, baby. You're like, oh, come on, get out of here.
I am the Bowery. All right. Number 2, Mike has mentioned his liking of Smith Machine for squatting. And if I recall, he has even once begrudgingly mentioned it might even be better in some ways than the standard squat for hypertrophy with regards to SFR. Yes, for the quads, potentially. Mm-hmm. Do you think there are any other exercises which may similarly or actually be better for hypertrophy or even just equivalent when performed in a Smith machine? Maybe barbell rows, bench presses, etc. I can't make blanket statements for everyone, but experiment with various exercises and you may find they have better SFRs for you. For me, incline presses feel great on a Smith machine. Flat presses feel confusing. What's it called? Close grip presses feel pretty good. Wide grip presses feel better on a regular bar. And upright rows sometimes feel good on a Smith machine, sometimes not. A lot of times it depends on if the bar is thick or whatever. And I think that there's a bunch of other exercises you could experiment with to see if maybe they're better for the Smith. Like, if my arms weren't so goddamn big, because as soon as my arms got really big, I couldn't do shoulder presses anymore because I can't bring the weight all the way down to my face. But before my arms got super retarded, I could. The barbell press free was 50 times better than any machine because there's no machine that does the arc, like not that much. So Smith machine was total garbage for me. But for some people it might be better, so on and so forth. James?
I have tried for years to get the overhead press, seated overhead press on the Smith machine to work because I grew up watching bodybuilders doing that shit. And I was always like, there's something here. How can I not figure this out? Why is this not a good movement for me? It turns out it's just a terrible movement for me. I can't do it. Bent rows and stuff, I don't really get much out of it. I think incline pressing, like Mike said, seems to be pretty good. It might just be one of those anthropometry things where if you're lanky like me, it might not be a great movement for you. But I think squats.
When you're lanky, you have more of an arc to your movements, and that means the Smith machine kind of rules itself out.
Yeah.
If you're short, you can do everything linear, little pumps, and I think that sometimes it works out.
I've done some like deadlift variants, like regular kind of style deads or like 3/4 deads or kind of like SL DLs in the Smith, and that sometimes is okay. I don't know. Smith for me has not been successful outside of squatting.
Yeah. Number 3, I recently watched the optimal rep ranges video. Mike mentions how the 10 to 15 rep range is likely ideal for hitting the intermediate fibers. I've also heard you guys mention how resting for shorter times and letting reps in subsequent sets fall isn't necessarily a huge deal since you're still getting the same effective reps for the faster twitch fibers and just missing out on the earlier reps for slower twitch fibers. But if the reason you're doing a set in the 10 to 15 rep range in the first place is to hit the intermediate twitch fibers, then wouldn't it defeat the purpose to let subsequent sets drops below 10 reps? So for the purpose of targeting intermediate fibers, for the same example, but for hitting the slower fibers in the 20 to 30 rep range, should you then rest longer to keep the reps in the appropriate range? That's definitely a good argument. There's a lot of thinking to go on. I would say that the intermediate fibers then get hit really well in the 20 or 30 rep range. And I think if you want to hit the slower fibers a lot, then you really are just walking and moving your body around at that point. So anything lighter than the 20-30 rep range just doesn't make a whole lot of sense. But if you want to rest a bit more to accumulate a bit more volume, I think you have somewhat of an argument. Absolutely. So I think at times, so remember, we're saying it's not a huge deal to rest only enough to get 5 reps, but there might be some small differences. So sometimes maybe it is a good idea to rest a little longer so you get a little more than just 5 reps. Sometimes that autocorrects actually, because if you rest long enough until your cardiovascular system isn't a limiting factor anymore, and now your muscle is your limiting factor again, the muscle at that point might have been resting 10 times longer than it needed for its own 5 reps to be met. So now you're good for another 20 reps. Like that can totally happen. Like so basically, like if you do a set of squats, like you do a set of 15 in a squat, by the time your breathing has returned to normal, your quads, your lower back, and your central fatigue is like none, right? Like everything is fine. It's just your breathing took that long. Once your breathing is relatively normal, that means it's no longer a limiting factor, and now your quads are a limiting factor again. You might actually get a set of 12 after that, and then a set of 11. So I think a lot of times when people get these huge drop-offs of like 10, 5, 5, 3, 3, 3, they're actually not letting all 4 factors of recovery run their course.
Totally. So just keep in mind too, like we use those rep ranges because they are useful, but they are proxies, right? So what's more important here is the actual weight that you're using that gets you into that range. And that's why it's probably not a huge deal if the reps fall off, because it's more about the load that you're using, not necessarily like, did my set end at 8 reps, right? It's more that you were using a load that puts you in that initial zone on the first set, and now you're good to go. Now, there is something to be said about not resting enough and then really severely constricting your volumes that you can get unnecessarily, but within like some very reasonable constraints and stuff that Mike has talked about 1,000 times already, it's perfectly okay to let those drop off kind of outside of the initial range that you set, so long as you got there on the first set, you're at the right loading zone, and that's probably more important than the actual number of reps that you got within a few minor constraints.
James, do you remember that one time when there was this research lab and they were trying to save this person who had been in a terrible industrial accident? And
let me guess. He then became Metal Paul.
Yeah. Well,
yes.
Joke, sure.
Yes. Go finish it. Go ahead.
The main scientist was like, "How's he doing? Have you been able to save him?" Like, "Well, yes, doctor, but unfortunately, he's now all." And the tube turns around to expose him. Metal, and he's like shiny metal. And he's like, "Humanity's days are over."
He becomes like Metallo, like in DC.
Just the lamest fucking supervillain ever.
Yeah, I don't really understand what his purpose is.
He's like a robot with a fucking dildo in his heart made of Superman's bullshit. What is that shit called?
The kryptonite. Yeah.
It's like a dude with a kryptonite dildo in his ass. It's just,
Yeah. Speaking of dildos, sorry to sidebar. Have you seen
I thought you were gonna say kryptonite. But
Big Mouth season 3? Have you been watching?
so Crystal and I started watching it. I gotta say, man, I can't believe I'm gonna side a little bit with our friend Olga on this, just a little bit.
Oh my! I wish Mel could hear this.
I know, I like it, and I have to. We just watched 2 episodes. They're good, but it's a lot, man.
There's
It's
some like
a-
really cringy moments where you're just like, oh, like you feel the anxiety.
Yeah, and they're trying to smash a lot of controversial stuff into just a very, very short. The jokes are like boom, 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 and you're like, wow, okay, yeah. I can't even process if that was funny yet because it's been one like controversial thing after another. Like it's awesome, but it's just like, ooh, I need a break from it every now and again.
Yeah, it gets like, I don't want to give any spoilers. I just finished it like the other day. It like when you get deep into the season, there are some moments where like I was feeling legit panic for some of the characters where I was like, if this goes the direction that I think it's going to be like devastating for me to watch.
Yeah.
Right. And
Yeah.
they do a good job of like really building it up where you're just like, oh, I can't stand watching it. And then they just let it kind of diffuse and you never feel like the soul crushing defeat of what you think is going to happen.
Well, that's good.
Yeah, there was at least 3 or 4 moments where I was like, if this happens on the show, I might have to turn it off because it's like too much.
Man.
But then like it just kind of fizzles, right? And like they fizzle it out and you never really feel it and you're like, okay, I'm good. We can keep going. But the season's good. It's worth watching. The World War Come episode is like so funny.
Oh God. All right, I gotta get on it.
Yeah, stick with it. I know it is a lot. It's intense, but it's worth it.
Metal Paul says, "Hey Docs, training is going great. Thanks for all the advice. Number 1, if someone always gets up in the middle of the night to take a piss, would it be a good idea to allocate some protein for that time? You could allocate, say, 10 grams of protein and chug down a small casein shake to stay in an anabolic state for longer. The jury's still out on that. There might be some benefits of just not digesting anything for a while, letting your gut clear. Might be benefit in generating a bit of a refraction or a bit of a refractory period from not eating. Brano Chavez seems to think there might be a small benefit. So it's good to eat most of the day, but at night maybe it's better not to eat. But then again, that might not be the case. I can't say one way or the other. So maybe try it, maybe not.
I think too, like for the amount of potential benefit you might get, it's an awful lot of fuss. I mean, like you have to have that ready to go. It has to become part of your routine. It's a bit of fuss.
Yeah. And then he says, on my second leg day, I seem to be getting cramps in the evening in my quads. It's freaking horrible. Can't get up off the couch sometimes. LOL. Is this a good thing or a bad thing? Secondly, any idea what might be causing it, as I never had this before. The only thing I've changed besides being in a deficit is that I'm now doing some 20 to 30 rep leg extensions where I go balls to the fucking wall. This burns, I'm dying, but I don't fucking care. Give me the gains. Keep squeezing out those last reps. Water intake, sodium, etc. I won't change. So you're basically like reaching you're a short-term functional overreaching. You can train hard enough to disrupt excitation and contraction coupling. As long as if you do this for several weeks and your performance is increasing or stable, I wouldn't worry about it. But this could be a sign that you're going way too hard and your performance may start to decline. And then I would be careful and sort of limit how much volume you do like this, James.
This is like not unusual when you introduce metabolite training to any given muscle group, especially the legs. This is one of those things like weeks 1 and 2, you might get like fasciculations and some cramping, and then weeks 3 and on, it just goes away by itself. But what Mike said is spot on. You're probably acutely overreaching on that particular exercise. So maybe just back off of one set for now, see how it goes. But I can just tell you from experience, like this happens. It's not great. It doesn't feel good. But it happens. It's not like it's not unusual is all I'm saying. So don't read too deeply into it outside of maybe just consider that you did a few too many sets. Other than that, probably no big deal.
Yeah. All right. And over the green hills from Ireland comes Kevin Farley.
That's where we're going.
I don't know if he's from Ireland. We're going to Ireland in a couple of days. Kevin Farley sure as hell seems like his last name comes from Ireland.
Mm-hmm.
And he says, "Hey Docs, hope all is well. Really been enjoying the content lately as well as the app and its updates, and the hypertrophy template's super cool. Questions. Number 1, can I get your educated opinions on natural bodybuilding competitors who are cycling legal over-the-counter test boosters in their federations. Does this stuff really work? I imagine that their adherence to the contest prep diet, training, and cardio have more to do with their peeled appearance than they're cycling in for supplements. Hey, Jared Feather's better to ask about this, but I know the guys that used to use pro hormones now don't, and they compete naturally. All the illegal over-the-counter test boosters either don't do anything or they're actually just steroids. So the ones that get tested regularly don't use them, but there's a lot of ways to beat natural bodybuilding tests. So I'm sure it happens. I think almost all natural bodybuilders at the very top are actually drug-free. But there are certainly guys that use this stuff. And it works, and it makes a pretty big difference. You can not sleep at night because you're a scumbag piece of shit that should be competing against drug users.
Yeah, I think it's more often than not just like Mike said, actual drugs put into a bottle, just straight up lying. So,
Number 2, would either of you recommend massing after any cut? Would it be better to mass after you get down to a specific body fat level? I'm currently in a maintenance phase.
Oh, I see.
After my cut this summer, where I went down to 209 pounds and I'm up to 212 currently, I have no idea what my body fat percentage is, but should I go back into a cut again to lower body weight before I mass? If you're like super fucking fat and there's stuff hanging off, just maintain for a while, then cut again. But if there's nothing hanging off, then you're good to mass. And if you see any semblance of abs or veins, you should definitely mass.
Yeah, I think that's like the good litmus test. Like if you have like, not just like, oh, I have a little bit of abs poking out and maybe some obliques going. Like if you have abs, you're good to go. And if you don't, maybe consider cutting until you do, but you don't have to. It's a good litmus test.
Number 3, when do you know your body's ready to go back into another cutting phase? It's actually pretty easy. So you envision the depravity of another cutting phase, it will entail, and you try to psychologically, very honestly, because there's no one watching, just you, see if that's something you can survive or it's something that you can get a lot out of without shitting the bed. Basically, like I'll put it to you this way. Let's say you're a week out after a hard cut and you're with your friends and you're at all-you-can-eat sushi. And like before the sushi comes out, you're like sort of nervous. Oh my God, what's the food going to get here? And as soon as it comes out, you start eating it, go ravenous. Oh my God, it's so good, it's so fucking good. And then the waitress comes by and is like, you guys want to order more? And you're like, yes. Oh my God, awesome. And then you have that thought to yourself, like, am I ready for another cutting phase in a week? And then you think about the no more all-you-can-eat sushi. You're like, fuck, no, I don't ever want to see another cut. I don't give fuck cutting, right? Then there's something intermediate where you're like, can I cut for another 3 months? And you're like, feeling pretty good. I'm not super hungry, but I know like I'm loving my food and I'm still a little beat up from the last phase. I'm still a bit food focused and my energy's not amazing yet. My training isn't great. I know like I could probably last a couple of weeks, but then I just fucking know I'm just going to go apeshit crazy and starve again. That's still not good to go. When it's first good to go is when you're like, you know what, I can fucking do another cut, no problem. Like super honest to myself. Like I'm over this food business. I don't really care one way or the other. I want to be fucking leaner. I know it's going to be a little tough, but I don't give a shit. Like I want to get fucking lean. And then the best scenario when you're for sure ready to cut is when someone's like, hey, do you want to go to all-you-can-eat sushi? You're like, well, no, don't talk about food. Don't talk about food. I can't do it. I can't do it anymore. Like I was eating, I'm massing right now. I was eating oatmeal with Splenda in it after my workout. And I was like, I took one spoonful and put it in my mouth and I was like, how the fuck am I going to get the other 10 spoonfuls in? Like, it was just difficult to eat the whole meal. There's only 100 grams of carbs, which for me is not a lot. I was like, fuck. Like, if I had to cut, if you said tomorrow you start cutting, I'm like, thank you. Thank God. Right? Dude. You basically figure out which one of those.
Brutal. Oatmeal's brutal. Great for cutting, but.
You know, James, I'll tell you this, man. I'm in this weird conundrum I'm sure you've been in before. I'm using oatmeal for pure variation because the thought of eating rice literally gave me, like, dry heaves. I was like,
oh yeah.
No more rice. That's it.
Oatmeal with Splenda is great too.
Yeah.
Or you get the like sugar-free syrup and just take out like 5 grams of carbs from oatmeal, and there you go.
Yep,
boom.
Totally. But like, if you had to tell me if like for most meals I had to eat oatmeal, I would just kill myself. But like every now and again, it's just better than rice because it's not rice.
Do you get like a sick full body pump from eating oatmeal?
You mean like right after with no training?
Yes.
No. Damn, James, you're onto some other shit, man.
I don't know what it is. When I eat oatmeal, like an hour later, I'll be like, just like swelling up. I feel it. It's so strange.
Oh.
I have no idea what it is. It's like
I think you're probably allergic to oatmeal.
Yeah, probably. And it's like about to go into anaphylaxis.
You're like,
this is great.
Don't fucking inject me with that shit. I need a fucking pump, you asshole. All right. And then he says, sorry to follow up again. Forgot to ask this one as well. If you are staying within a certain rep range, 10 to 20, for instance, is it not good If the later sets 3 and 4 creep into the 6 to 10 rep range based on RIR, totally fine. Actually, if you want to scroll back in the recording and when we answered Sean Morikawa's question number 3, that would be pertinent to that. But generally speaking, it's totally fine unless the reps get below 5 and then you're kind of fucked.
And then also just wanted to backtrack to the first part of that question. Another good thing to consider too, and I know you asked more about when your body is ready to get back to cutting, but also consider like when your lifestyle is ready to go back to cutting. Like, do you have stuff going on? Do you have plans? Do you have weddings? Do you have vacation? Do you have travel coming up? All of those things are also worth noting.
Yeah.
Okay.
If I had to do a biopic about you, James, it would be called Worth Noting, the James Hoffman Story.
Mm-hmm. James Hoffman story would be awful. All right, let's see. We got a few live questions here. You want me to take this?
Yeah.
All right.
Where the hell do you see live questions from?
You got to open the chat specifically.
Okay, great.
All right.
I'll take it. I can start, James.
Go for it.
Mariana's iPhone says, Kyle here.
It says Mariana's phone. Now you're Kyle. Come on.
Jesus Christ. What is the difference between acute soreness that presents almost immediately versus the DOMS that arrives 2 days later? Should they inform my training differently? Some exercises give me almost no acute soreness, lots of DOMS, and other exercises cause the reverse. Does this even matter? DOMS is you probably caused by immune system infiltration after, and it's usually do considerably more damage than any acute damage that doesn't come with DOMS. So the stuff that causes DOMS means you're probably going pretty hard, and if it's a ton of DOMS, you might want to consider backing off because you might be able to train with a higher frequency or higher volume or higher intensity over the week if your DOMS per session is not completely insane and causes you 7 days of misery. So that's the difference probably.
A lot of the times you get acute soreness like that is because the novelty or the awkwardness of the movement is so massive. You get a lot of co-contraction, a lot of stabilization type tasks, and you just activate a lot of the muscle fibers, and it's just foreign, right? So your efficiency is very low. Some are just gnarly, like lunges. I'll get instant soreness. I don't know about you, Mike, but if I do dumbbell lunges, an hour later, my butt's already sore. Done deal.
I start getting fasciculations and cramps right during and after.
Yeah. And a lot of that could be, like I said, a lot of it's stabilization and inefficiency of the movement. Like if you haven't done it for a while, it's kind of a single leg movement. It's 2 legs, but you kind of are favoring one over the other. And could be that, could be all sorts of stuff, but I don't think it really influences your training to any large degree outside of what Mike said about getting too much DOMS.
Yeah. And then Sega says, what up?
Yeah, exactly. So he confirmed our suspicion on the lunges.
Oh, yeah, that's right. Lunges were exactly what I had in mind. Instasore from Mariana and Kyle.
All right. Well, it looks like that's it for this week.
It's not because we have to answer 3 questions from YouTube.
Oh, I forgot. Let's do it.
So I'll just go through my Insta. It'll function as a one-time proxy for YouTube. Interesting question that I wanted to expand on Instagram, but would not because Instagram is fucking annoying to type on. McCormick Brandon James asks, what's the difference between eccentric loading and stretching under tension? So my answer was stretching under tension is when you're at a very long muscle length and you apply tension during that time. Eccentric loading is simply when a muscle is lengthening, potentially not remotely being stretched, but you are controlling the lengthening, so you're applying tension. So for example, if you have a leg curl and you're literally as close, here's the knee open, here's the knee closed. If you do leg curls like this, okay, your hamstrings are getting stretched for shit. But if you slow this part and then go fast, slow this part, you're doing eccentric loading. Stretch under tension doesn't even have to be eccentric. It could be concentric only. If you go, and boom, and boom like that, then all of a sudden you're doing a lot of stretch under tension. Both of them independently likely promote different pathways to hypertrophy, so it's worth controlling eccentric on most movements and making sure the variety of exercises for a variety of muscle groups provide stretch under tension.
Yeah, so you could think of it really simply as if you had a pneumatic press that was pushing down on you. If you were to just mostly hold your arm limp and something pushed down, right, that would be stretch under tension. Eccentric loading is where you are actually doing a muscle contraction and allowing the muscle to lengthen at the same time. So Coach Tim did this shit to me once. We were in the fucking lab and He was like, "Hey, Coach Jim, catch!" He threw one of the blue plates at me.
I
Right.
would just swat it away. I wouldn't even bother catching it.
Right. So if it just had hit me and stretched me out, that would have been stretch under tension. If I catch it and bring it down, that's eccentric loading.
All right. Aspergains says there are so many confounding. This is in response to a post I made about delayed onset muscle soreness or soreness and damage. Damage and hypertrophy. There are so many confounding variables that it seems like all we can do is scale for optimality by trying to improve everything bit by bit on the off chance that that's the biggest variable affecting growth, which I'm not bemoaning. It just seems to be the way of things in this realm. Creating the right conditions for growth seem almost more important, like there's a general climate of conditions for all the variables above that produce optimal gains, perhaps using multiple modalities or pathways to stimulate enhanced performance or size, the perfect storm, so to speak. So the variables that I listed was using a novel exercise, increasing load, increasing relative intensity, increasing volume, eccentric loading, metabolite summation, stretch and retention, and targeting the right muscle to changing technique. All of these cause soreness, and they all cause growth. So I basically posted the slide off of a future RP Plus lecture to get people who immediately wipe away the idea that soreness could have any relationship to growth, as we don't want to dismiss that flippantly. Do you know what I mean, James? Like,
I got lost in what you were saying. Sorry. Could you?
So I listed basically 8 correlates of soreness and growth using a novel exercise, increasing load, increasing relative intensity, increasing volume,
I got that
eccentric
part.
loading. Yep. All that stuff correlates with soreness. So when people say soreness has nothing to do with growth,
Oh,
you
I
have
see.
to think that through,
Yeah.
right? Because there's a whole awful lot of correlation for us to say there's no way that can be causation, right? And this individual says that we basically might have to piecemeal these strategies bit by bit and see which one is best. What I would say is I think it's worth diving in and investigating whether or not damage at some mechanistic level causes hypertrophy to a point at all. Because here's the deal. If damage, in some sense, maybe it's a U-shaped curve, right? And at some point, damage is beneficial, and then it's negative. For sure, it's negative past a certain point. That's for sure already been resolved. The question is any damage actually causative to a point of growth, right? If there is a point of damage which is causative, that's awesome, because then we can use damage as a proxy for fucking hypertrophy and find out that endpoint and train to there. If we find out it's not at all and that zero damage is optimal for hypertrophy, so many people actually put their pictures in their profile. That's really cool. If we find out that damage is always and directly inhibitory, like competitive with hypertrophy, like recovery adaptation is this bag, and any amount of damage we take off to recovery gives weight adaptation, then we can optimize our programs essentially to try to maximize tension and stimulus and all those other things while trying to reduce damage as much as possible. So I think I had a lot of comments on this post to basically, it doesn't fucking matter, just train hard. Yeah, but what is hard and how hard? If damage truly has no relationship to hypertrophy at all, then who cares? We can stop looking at it. If damage costs hypertrophy, then we have to minimize it. If it's some benefit and at some point of cost, we need to know what those lines are. Do you know what I mean, James? Do you have anything to add in on that kind of? I just don't think it's an open and shut case where people are like, who cares? It's like,
Yeah.
Gee, we might need to care.
I think you're totally spot on. And I think it's also one of those things, like we probably won't know the answers to those questions for decades. It's just a very difficult thing to piecemeal together. But I think it also might be true that it might be a necessary evil, like as a byproduct of the things that you need to do to stimulate growth. Damage just happens, and it just is something that you have to manage, right? Rather than saying, like, is it detrimental or is it beneficial? It might be one of those things. It just is. And there's a point where it is too much, and that's pretty clear. But there's a huge gray area where it's just like a byproduct of the other things you need to do, like generating tension and metabolites and stuff like that. I don't know. I don't think we're going to know for a while, because it's such a nitpicky thing, and it's so hard to measure. I don't know how they could possibly measure that.
But it is worth trying to find out, because it can change training recommendations and very much fine-tune them.
And I mean, like, we usually talk about it in terms of hypertrophy, but you could also, that has major implications for sport training as well. Where it's
tons, yeah.
Most people don't think twice about saying like 3x5 or 5x5 during a sport, like a strength phase for any given sport. But you might actually find that like, okay, 2x5 causes so much disruption that the actual cost benefit of the strength you gained relative to how much damage you took might be terrible. Might actually be better to do like one set. Who knows? I don't know. I'm just speculating, but.
And because like full range of motion damages you more than partial range of motion on average, you might prescribe partial range of motion exercises in season.
Yeah.
If it shows out the damage is really that competitive with adaptation, that costly to fatigue, versus if it's part of the adaptive process and the process that conserves gains, and it's like, look, you got to do full squats because this is going to keep you in shape, and there's some amount of partial squats just can't do.
Yeah, especially when you factor in like a multi-variable training program where you have somebody who's not just doing weight training, maybe they're doing cardio, maybe they're doing naked hockey, like who knows, maybe they're doing all sorts of stuff. I think it becomes increasingly interesting. And then you could look at like, okay, what about soreness from contact? Is that the same? Like, has the same level of impact on hypertrophy training as soreness from training? Like, those are really interesting, weird questions that it's hard to answer.
Yeah, 100%. Last question from YouTube is by a gentleman I actually met in real life, Lloyd Supreme. I talked to there you go.
He's like a Kai or some shit.
That's right. He says, so I said in this post that the chest is one of the most straightforward muscles to train. You just use full ROM on presses and flies and just go all the way up and down, and you're just going to get bigger if you get stronger. He asked an interesting question: what muscles would you classify as difficult to train? I had at least two ideas, possibly three that I listed here. Rear delts, why the difficulty? I want to hear your thoughts, James, on what you think are some muscles that are difficult to train. I don't mean hard, like perceptively, or like they take a lot of effort. I just mean like if someone's like, hey, I can't hit my XYZ, you'd be like, oh, that's easy. Like you're gonna have to do some work, but I can tell you how. Versus if they say, well, I can't hit this other muscle, you're like, oh, gee, that's tough. So for me, rear delts, like I don't know when they're on, I don't know when they're off. 50 exercises sort of activate them, but nothing really isolates them. Traps. If you go heavy enough in the shrug to really get your traps, you have no idea what you're doing anymore. When you go light enough, nothing fucking works. And it's just, Ronnie Coleman said once, there's so many muscles on the way to the traps. Like if you're holding a dumbbell here, it's the forearms, it's the biceps, it's the shoulders. And by the time you get to your traps, you're like, I don't know what is limiting this motion. I don't know if it's my traps or not. And then I've solved these problems with hamstrings for myself, but for many people, hamstrings. Because like if you don't know how to do a proper SLDL, which takes at least 2, probably 3 points of control, the arching of the chest or arching of the spine, posterior anterior pelvic tilt, and making sure to control knee flexion or extension. If you miss any one of those, especially the hips and the knees, the movement turns completely ineffective. Like you'd be doing stiff leg downs for years and just get nothing out of them. So I think for me, those movements, those muscles have been much more challenging to hit. Like someone's like, I can't train my quads. They're like, get on this leg press, go all the way up and down. Now die. Like that's it. There's no quads are so easy to smash. What do you think, James? What are some muscles that you've experienced are tough to hit?
I think those were really good examples. We were on the same wavelength. I was going to say rhomboids because the way you have to
target your rhomboids.
Yeah, you have to go against gravity, right? So unless you're in like a seated position, and you have to be willing to allow the scapular protraction to even occur. Most people will get in a good posture and then lock up with their scapulas retracted, and then they're not really training their scapulas as much anymore. They're just doing isometric. So it's really hard to actually get the movement. It's hard to get into a good position. So I always found those, and sometimes people will like flare their elbows out and get a lot of lat kind of co-activation on a lot of movement, stuff like that. So that was always one that was tough. I had another one. Targeting the lower part of the abdominals can be very difficult for a lot of people. And this I think is especially like with female clients. A lot of times, like the top, like 1 to 4 abs will be really prominent when they get really lean, and then the bottom part will just kind of wash out. And it's difficult. There's only a few movements that can really get in there, and even then, it's like it might be emphasizing the top half way more than the bottom half. It's a tough one.
Yeah, 100%. That's it, man.
Those weren't terrible for Instagram questions.
I selectively picked them. I'm sure we'll get more worse questions later.
All right, so little housekeeping. So we're going to be leaving for Ireland on Thursday. When are you coming back?
Monday.
You're going to be back Monday? Mel and I might still be in Ireland until... Mel, do you know what day we get back?
The 23rd.
Do you know what day that is? Is it like a Monday, Tuesday, Wednesday?
23rd is a Wednesday.
Wednesday. So we might have to do a modified schedule for this upcoming week.
Let's
So-
schedule it for next Thursday then, maybe.
okay, so RP Plus and YouTube, we're going to do a modified schedule next week because of the seminar that we're doing in Dublin. So let's plan for the same time, which is 7:30 Eastern U.S. time, 4:30 California time, on Thursday this week, not the usual Tuesday because we're going to be traveling. So one more time, Thursday this week, normal time instead of Tuesday.
Next week.
Next week, sorry, excuse me. Yeah, okay, cool. I think we're all set.
All right. Bye, Internet.
Later. Thank you.